Well, that didn't take long. Carlton are back to the drawing board after they got annihilated in a fixture that's caused some extreme problems for them over the last few years. Now, whilst I could list off a number of unacceptable performances from the weekend, and ultimately the team looked out of sorts, there's one player who's had me properly concerned for practically the entire year. Jesse Motlop's output this season has been hardly moving. 11 touches, 4 tackles, and under a goal a match. Though, when you remove his performance that had him kick 3 final quarter junk time goals against North, and his best game of the season against Hawthorn a one-off, the stats are alarming, revealing a dangerous low with his inconsistency. Under 10 touches and 2.5 tackles per contest, and also 2 goals in 6 matches. As a small forward, in the Adelaide loss, I was concerned, granted not just with him. What happens to him is symptomatic of what happens when the team surrenders control. There's no means to get involved, and when Carlton lost field position, that's when we forgot players like Motlop even existed. The question that is tough to answer at the moment is, can we attribute Motlop's underperformance to the team faltering? Or is there an element of control where Mots can give himself a bit more leverage, a bit more involvement, and elevate the ceiling of this team? Let's have a look based on this game. I do think the numbers speak for themselves. The Crows had 22 more inside 50s, Carlton got demolished for centre clearances, and lost out on contested possessions. Carlton had 14 less marks inside 50, with 8 less contested marks total. The time was predominantly spent in Adelaide's forward half, and generally they were better in possession, with more first possessions leading to clearance and a higher disposal efficiency. Naturally, as a forward of any kind, trailing in these stats are concerning. You're basically rendered a non-factor, especially when it comes to the defensive side of things. But the biggest concern is when the ball did head forward, Adelaide had 23 intercept marks, 10 more than the Blues, reflected in the sub 10% output for scores from defensive half for the Blues on the day. For Motlop, this is less than ideal. There's no opportunity for ground level presence or presence at all in the attacking half of the ground. One component of this is Carlton's kicking going forward. If I am a small forward stationing myself in the right place, but the kick's wayward, then I look like a right idiot. But I think another part of the problem is passivity. I think we can cut Motlop some slack. I think around forward 50 stoppages, he's pretty on the move, and with Carlton getting killed in ruck contests, and in terms of getting first service, I don't think he's to blame there. But around the ground in open play, when we need aid going forward, it seems like he's running around a bit like a headless chook, or with little purpose, or isn't demanding it at all. And we're a man down in that respect. Here's one example where Carlton actually scored a goal. I don't think it's remotely smart running towards the open man to mitigate the positive effects of what a 2-on-1 would provide. It's nonsensical. And while this is speculative, it doesn't seem like he wants any part in the possession. Look, there's probably a directive for him to sprint forward and create an option, but I don't have great hope if Charlie thinks he's too far out that Motlop will actually get involved. This is probably a clearer visualization. His lack of movement indicates passiveness. If he really wanted to, he could lead up at the ball and maybe hold a couple of defenders accountable. Now, the ball does not continue on its diagonal trajectory, rather heading towards straight in front of goal. Mots is in this middle ground where he is between both Charlie and Harry. And when it's headed for Harry, Mots is kidding himself if he thinks he has any chance of involvement with this positioning. It's frustrating because for some mysterious reason, the small forwards positioned themselves in this fashion on numerous occasions, which is what seemed to be an irrational gamble when the Crows defenders were rock solid in this game. And just to add a bit of insult to injury, Elijah Hollands has done the work to anticipate from the front of the contest to head straight onto goal, and Motts applies a component of sabotage to lock up his teammate and lower the effectiveness of disposal. It's just baffling. Here's another example. Like, there's no want for involvement, nowhere near any play, and where it's anticipated to go. It's just the most pedestrian movement. Like, even if you just worked into a block of space, make yourself productive, maybe Sam Walsh could have done with a handball receive, and then you can attack potentially this opportunity and force a ripple effect. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Take an example here, where there's a massive block of space and a leading lane. Call for a clear out and demand the ball. What actual kick occurs? Well, the kick's meant for Harry, but with this man now plugging the hole, the kick needs to go higher to compensate, meaning the accuracy is a little lacking. Motlop is completely invisible. He doesn't really react to where the ball is headed either, and there's a clearance with a 2-on-1 at ground level. A little bit of assertion wouldn't go astray, even if he doesn't get honoured. Believe it or not, the clearance actually gets the Crows up the other end for a goal scoring opportunity. Crazy how minor blips can have such large implications. Here's a perfect visualization of what we want versus what we get, embodied through another of our small forwards, Corey Durden. Durden initially contests, then points back to goal, then wants it wide, then points left, and then turns his defender inside out and gets rewarded for that work rate. Now granted, Durden has the benefit of the space to work with, but those repeat leading efforts get him onside to that space with a gap on his opponent. Rewind and play with a focus on Motlop, and the contrast could not be any more sizable. Now, part of the reason intercepting was occurring is because if Motlop was close to a marking contest trying to rove, his taller opponent was becoming a marking threat. That's not playing into a dominant tall forward performance from either Charlie or Harry. As long as our smaller players aren't leading up and presenting, or aren't clearing out and are as one-dimensional as this looks by simply roving, these outcomes will keep occurring for situations like these. The equal worrying component is when he does get the ball, or he does get involved, or is around the ball, he's got little to no leverage over his opponent. I mean, this guy surely has spent off seasons in the weight room, and I've witnessed little to no on-field benefit as a byproduct of that hard work. It also feels like the best way I can describe it is he's just consistently tracking the ball like he's in spectator mode. Like he's there, but not really. Or another way of putting it is, he's played 48 games, but I still feel like I'm trapped in his rookie season. More importantly, his on-field IQ is leaving a lot to be desired as well. Take an early centre bounce attendance. Now, I know this is incredibly hard to do in the moment in real time, but there's a 2-on-1 here. An opportunity to force the roll up and free up the wide man. A shepherd for Chera or comms to get Chera to do the same for you would work wonders. But I like Chera moving in from the diagonal to place Nankervis at a disadvantage momentum-wise. Definitely strays away from the vanilla footballing play we see here. Instead, and this is what I'm alluding to, I need Motlop to tackle shrug or hold onto the footy. He does neither, and as they exit out the front of the stoppage, it leads into a walk-in goal. We've got an example here where he starts somewhat close to the contest. Now, if the expectation is that you're going to come up and press the loose players on the defensive side for the Crows, you need to stick tackles. It's an incredibly easy bypass, and not only that, but it's resulted in a utilization of Motlop's man at the initial contest, helping them access the open side of the ground. Carlton couldn't defend for dear life, so this is less than ideal, and Adelaide kicked to advantage with a fair chunk of space favouring this region, which is what the kick accommodates. Like, I need more, and Carlton were guilty on many occasions of not being able to secure these 50-50 wins. And with a Crows victory in these situations, the Crows held a high line, and Carlton's small forwards didn't stand a chance, given the Crows had extra men behind the ball, and in this case here, Tex Walker basically gets it in an identical space this time of the lead-up variety. As we've just alluded to, when it comes to defending, there's weird sequences like these, courtesy of the zone defense, which are bound to occur if you don't communicate correctly. You'll notice both are pointing to pick up the man over the top, and then both get drawn in at the exact same time, which means from that moment on, Adelaide's numbers can overwhelm, and the space can be accessed and attacked. As a small forward pushing up the ground, you're there for a reason, and it's sure as hell not to give your backline less relief with breakdowns like this. So overall, what's the assessment? Well, I do think the situation of the game was suboptimal for Motlop, starving him of opportunities, especially in more attacking areas. But I definitely think some responsibility needs to be placed on the man himself. Right now, the impact is lacking in just about every facet, and I don't know if it's a directive to just be a specialist at crumbing and pressure, but I think it's ineffective to limit him in such a way if that's the case. When the phrase leaving too much to too few gets thrown around, this is why. Look, I've thrown up a few suggestions and I've almost pleaded for more. But what's your stance on this? Are Carlton playing in a way that doesn't optimize a small forward like Motlop as much as you'd like? Or is the onus entirely on Motlop? Thanks for tuning in. We'll chat to you in next week's analysis, but until then, stay safe and bye for now.